How do you feel about taking a leap of faith into the unknown? Well, that is one of the big topics in today's conversation. We are meeting with Mike, who is a psychotherapist and counsellor, and we're going to learn all about his area of expertise. We're going to learn about his career journey that included a mid-career change from established, successful IT professional to retraining as a psychotherapist and counsellor. We're going to learn some great advice from Mike too. And we're also going to talk about financial security in career decision making, navigating that mid-career change and retraining, pursuing passion, purpose, and career fulfillment, the importance of continuous learning, setting boundaries to prevent burnout, the power of self-reflection and self-awareness, imposter syndrome, and fear of failure, and of course, taking a leap of faith, not letting that fear stopping you from doing something. And rather than thinking, what's the worst that can happen, reframing it as what's the best that can happen. So if that sounds good to you, carry on listening, carry on watching, and Mike and I look forward to seeing you there. We hope you enjoy the episode. Mike, hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jo. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, no, you're welcome. No, it's good to be here.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, before we get started, how about you give us a quick overview of who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Yeah. So I'm Mike. I am a full-time counsellor and psychotherapist based in South East London, but I'm originally from Salford, Greater Manchester. I've been working with clients for just over 3 years now. The first kind of year and a half was in kind of low-cost counselling services, kind of locally to here. And that was while I was completing my counselling training. But for the past 18 months or so, I've been full-time in private practice. So yeah. Currently providing sort of counselling psychotherapy services in my private practice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, I can't wait to do a deep dive into that a bit later. But this is a podcast. Yeah. So tell us what podcasts you're enjoying right now.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because I think a lot of, even like with the TV shows, I really am interested in like true crime. And so I always find myself when it comes to podcasts listening to that kind of thing. And for a while now, Case File has been my kind of go-to true crime podcast. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I've seen it, but for some reason I've never clicked on it, but you're inspiring me to want to click on it now.
Yeah, it's just like, it's Australian, but it kind of covers crimes kind of in Australia, the UK, the US, and kind of other parts of the world. But it's been going for like 6 or 7 years now. It's just really, they usually do like one case per episode, and it's just, it's really easy to digest, and it's really, I like that one.
And what would be an example of a good case or a good episode that you could recommend?
Yeah, well, I can't remember exactly, but it was like it was one of the early episodes, and it was about, it was kind of like an unsolved kind of almost mystery where it was kind of like they found a guy who was like, effectively they found this guy dead on a beach. I think it was in Australia. Yeah. And basically I had no possessions on him at all. They couldn't figure out his identity. And there was lots of like theories around, like, was he a spy? Or all of these kind of really interesting kind of conspiracy theories, but it was kind of like the unsolved ones that kind of fascinate me because I kind of feel like there's a bit of mystery around them. Yeah.
Oh, see, I always like an ending, so I think I'd struggle with that, but I'm going to give it a
go. Yeah, give it a go.
I will. I'll definitely give it a go. Okay. So, Mike, there's often misconceptions around what we do. And so I'd love to know what your friends and family outside of the industry think you're doing all day.
Yeah, really good question. I think, and to be honest, it probably ties in with what a lot of people think about counselling and psychotherapy, the biggest misconception, which is that we kind of advise our clients or tell them what we think that they should do, which really is far from it. You know, it really is about kind of like helping like my clients to work through their issues rather than obviously like telling them what to do. There are elements, I think, sometimes where, and maybe it depends on the client as well, but sometimes there are elements of coaching to an extent. So, or kind of like suggestions as to what kind of tools and techniques that they could benefit from. But there's never any pressure for them to do anything with that information. And it's not it's not me telling them what to do or like advising. So yeah, I mean, I work with like a range of clients with a range of different issues, and ultimately though, it is all about kind of just helping them, you know, to kind of work through those issues and hopefully just kind of be feeling better at the end of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that leads me on to my next question, which is, you know, if a client comes to you, you know, what are they hoping to achieve? What would be the purpose of the counsellor psychotherapist be for them?
Yeah. So again, it really just varies. Sometimes I work with clients who have got real specific goals that they want to achieve, real kind of focuses in the therapy. But sometimes, Joe, I find that clients come to therapy not really knowing exactly what they want to get out of it. Sometimes it's just like not being in the best sort of place at the time, just kind of maybe feeling a bit stuck, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and I guess to an extent, whether they've got like specific goals or not, as I said, it is really just about kind of working with them to kind of just improve their situation. Yeah. And, you know, obviously it's with my help, but it's kind of really helping them to figure things out and like the best solutions for them. Yeah. So, not always specific goals, probably 50-50, I would say, in my experience, where people know exactly what they want to get out of therapy, whereas other people not necessarily knowing exactly what their goals are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really helpful. Thank you. Now, I think it'd be really helpful if you could give us a bit of an overview of the industry, because I think sometimes it can be confusing when you think about terms like counsellor, psychotherapist, psychologist, coach, psychiatrist. Yeah. Like, help us understand where you fit in.
Yeah, another great question. So, and this is the thing, I mean, in the UK, counselling psychotherapy, it's not a regulated industry, so they're not protected titles. Yeah. So, I mean, I refer to myself as a counsellor and psychotherapist because I do offer sort of both services. And as I mentioned, I'm in private practice. But, and to be honest, counselling can be a bit of a minefield. You know, there's so many different places that somebody could go to get therapy services. So that could be via their GP, sort of NHS. That could be charities, low-cost counselling services, employee assistance programs as well. So kind of getting therapy through effectively via work. Yeah. And obviously therapists like myself who are working in private practice. But as I say, you know, with the UK effectively not being regulated when it comes to counselling and psychotherapy, that's where it can be a bit of a minefield. So for instance, like a client who's looking for therapy, there's so many therapists out there, so many different approaches. It can be, I think, quite challenging to, you know, to really find maybe the right approach or the right therapist for them. But also I think it really links in with, even if you want to train to become a therapist as well, but that is a minefield too. Like there's so many different routes that you can go down to become a therapist. And it's kind of like, I think I only really appreciated that the further I was into my own training, just how many different routes that there are. So like I say, I think the term sort of minefield comes to mind when it's kind of thinking about just even starting that process of either training to be a therapist or actually going to get sort of therapy services. Yeah, it's very confusing. But if somebody was thinking, and I suppose just going slightly off piste here, if somebody was thinking, I'd really like to actually get some therapy myself, or think about exploring whether this might be the right option for them, where would you point them as a potential client? Yeah, I think, well, the main kind of, or one of the main things that comes to my mind is the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. So they're a professional membership body in the UK. I'm a member of the BACP, that they're referred to as. And so they have like a list of all registered counsellors that belong to their organisation or who are members like myself of their organisation. And so I think it just proves that, you know, in order to become a member of the BACP, like myself, you have to be qualified. You have to have hit certain requirements to become a therapist. So that's where I think it's good, because you know that going to the BACP, looking at their website, you'll be able to find a therapist who is qualified and trained. So that would be a good resource, I think.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much. All right. So Mike, let's zoom into an average week or day or week. What might we find you doing?
Yeah, so effectively, I provide counselling sessions via in person, over Zoom, and via telephone as well.
Yeah.
And those sessions are 50 minutes each. So I'll be working with a client for 50 minutes at a time. After the sessions, I'll be making brief kind of factual notes based on the session that we've just had. And then so before the next session, I'll be reading the notes from the session before.
Yeah.
So that's the actual sort of session itself. I mean, there's quite a bit of admin as well around kind of the sessions. So typically on like a Friday afternoon, I tend to take about an hour and a half to do my admin for like the following week sessions.
Yeah.
So that might involve things like emailing clients like Zoom details for those working on Zoom, sending invoices or payment links with regards to fees, maybe even just confirming appointments or sending out reminders, that kind of thing. That's kind of part of my admin, if you like, as well. But also, you know, as part of being a therapist and, as I say, a member of the BACP, I am required to have what's referred to as supervision, which is kind of a different context in therapy. So I see my supervisor every other week, so typically twice a month. And my supervisor's role effectively is to support me in my client work. So I'll talk to them about kind of like certain clients. Maybe if I'm kind of wanting a bit more support with certain clients, they'll be able to kind of really support me with that. And they might be able to kind of see something that I've not seen yet. So they might say, oh, you talked about this, or have you asked them about this?
Yeah.
But ultimately, their role is to make sure that I'm practicing safely, ethically, and professionally. Because obviously, you know, in the room, it's just myself and the client. So it's just a way that my practice is supported effectively, and ultimately the client. That's who the supervisor really is there for. So that's a big part of my. I mean, I guess that's every other week, but that's quite a big part of that as well.
Oh, thank you. And of course, being a therapist in private practice is, you know, you're running your own business, and you know, I'm guessing clients just don't come knocking on the door. You have to actually go and find them. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So effectively, so with being a member of the BACP, again, they have like a therapist directory. So I signed up to that. There is a fee, like an annual fee, but effectively I've got a profile on their website. So that's where a client could kind of see everything about my practice. They would be able to go on there and, you know, filter, for example, if they wanted in person, or, you know, for location or certain characteristics of therapists they're looking for. So the BACP register is one of them. There's another one which is called Psychology Today, which I find really useful way of clients finding me. So for instance, I work with a lot of LGBTQ plus clients, and you can really filter on Psychology Today. So they're able to kind of search for location, therapists who work with LGBTQ issues, if that's something that they're wanting support with, kind of even like age ranges, you know, all of the kind of characteristics of a therapist that they might be looking for. So gender, you know, that kind of thing. So they're the main ways that I kind of advertise effectively. I do have my own website as well, which I'm really proud of. It took me a while to kind of work on that, but that's something that I wanted to make sure was in place before. And to be honest, sometimes I will get referrals from either other therapists that are in my network. Sometimes even clients themselves might recommend me to somebody who might be an acquaintance or somebody that they know. So it's quite interesting, actually, just the different sources, effectively. There's quite a few.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Thank you. All right. So if we zoom out a little bit, what might we find you doing, I guess, on an ad hoc basis throughout the year that, you know, it's not happening every day or week, but you've still got to do it as part of your role? Another good question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, again, more admin related, is kind of like the tax related admin, because obviously working self-employed. So that's something that I have to do regularly, kind of obviously to make sure that I'm tracking my earnings, my expenses, so that I know how much to calculate for tax and national insurance the following year. So just to make sure I've got that saved to one side, so I'm not got a nasty surprise when it comes to the tax bill.
But the other really important part of what I do, but not every single day, will be effectively more learning and training. So kind of the CPD, the continuing professional development side of things. Again, being a member of the BACP, I'm required to do at least 30 hours a year of CPD, counselling related CPD. And I do in the end quite a lot more than that. But that might be online courses, reading, research. Like after I qualified as a therapist, I actually enrolled onto a master's course in counselling psychotherapy because I wasn't ready to finish the learning part of it yet. And really get into the research side of things as well. So that's happens quite a lot throughout the year, but not an everyday part of the role, but is effectively just carrying on learning, making sure that my skills and knowledge are up to date.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So Mike, tell us what you love most about your role.
I mean, it's the client work. It is. I mean, obviously that's the biggest part of it, but it really is about really helping people. That's where I really get a lot of my energy and passion from. And it is really, putting that into practice. But like I said as well, it is about kind of learning new things as well, because, obviously we're always learning and there's always things that are changing as well. So, it might be something that, for example, there might be a client issue that I tend to work less with. So it's at times during the year that I'll be like, I'm going to do a bit more learning in that particular area, so I can really, effectively get more knowledge and skills in that area, so that the next time I'm working with a client with that particular issue, then obviously I'm better equipped as well. So the client work ultimately is what I love the most about my role. But just the continuing learning as well.
Thank you. And what about the challenges of the work? What would you say would be the biggest challenges?
I think for me personally, and again, working sort of full-time in private practice, it is that temptation sometimes to maybe take on a bit more work than perhaps I should, because I don't have a guaranteed or set monthly income effectively. So sometimes there is that part of me that's tempted to probably work more than I should. But just like any role, it's really important that I have my boundaries and that I don't burn out. So it is about really finding that balance, because obviously if I'm sick or if I'm on holiday, then I'm not making any money, being self-employed. So it is really about finding that balance between making sure that I don't burn out, that I'm still the best therapist I can be for my clients as well, but also, sort of being able to effectively live as well, it's a big part of your own business. So
of course.
That balance effectively.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. So when you look back on the work, and obviously I wouldn't expect you to breach client confidentiality, but can you tell us about your proudest moment so far?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it is really about, I think, having those real breakthrough moments with clients. So like when I realized that I've helped them to figure something out that they've been looking to kind of figure out for a long time, or those kind of light bulb moments where it's like I've helped them to shift their perception maybe of themselves or their situation, and it can just really result in like big steps forward for them. So and I can see it sometimes, like even in the room or on their face, I can really see it. And so I think that's when I feel really proud of helping them to get to that point. But also, especially with the longer term clients that I work with, when they actually when they're ready to end therapy, I'm really proud that they've got to that point where they don't need it anymore. They don't need the therapy. They've got to a place where they're in a much better place than what they were when they started. And again, just knowing that obviously it's collaborative, but like knowing that I've helped them to get to that sort of better place. That's where a lot of my pride in my kind of role comes from, for sure.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, Mike, let's go back to the beginning. When you were a child, what did you want to be? When you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So, I mean, when I was a kid, so maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe, I wanted to become an actor. And I don't know why. I don't know even where that stems from, but that was just what I wanted to be, like, for my first memory of what I wanted to do in the future. But then when I was about 10, we got our first home computer. So this was in the 90s. And so got the first home computer, and I just became really interested and fascinated in computers.
Yeah.
So actually, I then kind of, wanted to work in IT. I had no idea what that would look like or what that would involve. But then I was like, I'm gonna work in IT, in a role where somehow I'm working with computers. That was kind of, from about the age of 10 onwards. And that really did kind of shift things for me. So that was kind of really, like I said, I didn't know exactly what the role would look like, but something involving computers.
And what was it about that first computer that made you think, there's something here for me?
I think it was a mixture of things, Joe. So I think it was like, in those days, like, it's not like computers were that common, like having it even at home. I think before that I just used one at school every now and then. But so it was really, I was just really fascinated by, I don't know, like having the internet at that stage as well, and all of the information that you could get, and just being really fascinated with just with different programs and like how they worked. But I think it was kind of like, it was my dad as well. So he bought this computer, and I think for me, it was kind of, even having an understanding somehow at that age that it was like a career that I could get into that was going to offer stability, like security and financial stability as well. Because, where I grew up, kind of, working class background, money was always tight. And and I was always aware of that, I think, growing up as well. And I think, so my dad helped me. I think he kind of, because of his experiences, I think he was kind of like sort of maybe helping me to get to a point where I would be a bit more financially stable. Yeah. So I think that was something that was really part of that kind of interest, if you like. Yeah. I think that was, part of the motivation for going down that route originally. Yeah. Obviously very different to what I'm doing now, but that was kind of what was happening at the time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So talk to us about how that desire weaved into your educational choices from that age.
Yeah, so I think it was even, what would I have been, like 13, around that age where you have to kind of select your options as to what classes you're going to take, even later on in high school. So, that was certainly one of them, IT. And then sort of after I finished high school, I went on to college for 2 years, and the subjects that I took were computer science, Spanish, and psychology. And really, the computer science and Spanish were my interests, and they were the kind of the subjects that I got A's on at GCSE. So I knew that was something I was good at and that I was interested in. And the psychology was a bit left field at the time. I'd always kind of been interested in like human behavior and psychology generally. And so I decided to take that almost as like a hobby subject, not realizing, where that would come in later down the line. It was really, those were my 3 A levels that I studied. And then when it came to finishing college, I went to uni. Yeah. And I actually found a course that offered a combined honours degree in computer science and Spanish. So I left psychology, or parked it, shall I say, at the time, and ended up taking this degree where I was the only person effectively in the uni that was doing these 2 subjects at the same time, because it's not the most common combination. I had a great experience at uni. I did a couple of internships while I was there. Because I studied Spanish, I got to live in Madrid for a year. So I studied and worked in Madrid, which was amazing. Yeah. Came back and then finished my final year at uni, and then sort of started looking for jobs in IT effectively.
Yeah. Great. So while you were pursuing the computer science as part of your educational journey, at what point did you, put 2 and 2 together, I guess, around what kind of career this could actually mean for you?
As in the IT role?
Yeah.
Really good question, because looking back now, I couldn't really tell you. It was probably luck and coincidence was a lot of it, to be honest. Yeah. Even finishing uni, effectively it was a 4-year course, including the year abroad. I got to the end of the course and I didn't know what roles were available in the industry still. I had the internships I did. One of them was sort of software development. One of them was web development. But being an internship for quite a short time, it didn't really give me a lot of information as to kind of what that would really be like as a full-time job. So it was, luckily there was an older friend of mine at the time. He knew somebody who worked for a company who were effectively an agency that took on IT graduates, trained them in specific roles, and then effectively hired them out to blue chip companies. So it was great. It was a really good opportunity, and I that was where I understood kind of what roles were available to me. Yeah. So I trained in sort of what's referred to as application support or production support. It's effectively like a bit sort of second to third line, if you like, of support, of IT support, effectively. Yeah. And I ended up working for one of the big banks in London, and then after that, for other financial companies as well, in the similar kind of role, so more of the sort of support side of things. But it wasn't until after finishing uni that the roles kind of what roles were available to me became clearer. Looking back now, as I say, it was a lot of coincidence and luck, I think.
Yeah. So this program sounds brilliant. Did you get a choice of, I guess, what role, you could, I guess, lean into more than others, or was it quite set?
Yeah, no, you could absolutely choose. So I think there was like a few interviews as to kind of, and I think at that point you had to make an indication of which one you kind of fancied at the time. Yeah. But then when you started, I think they kind of gave you, because it was unpaid trade, but they trained you until the point of you being effectively working for a company that they were associated with. But they really, after being successful at interview with them, they really trained you up in whatever role that you wanted in particular. Okay. So there's probably about 3 or 4 main roles, if my memory serves me right. And at that point, I realized that actually software development wasn't really for me, or web development sort of weren't really for me. And actually more of the support side of things. It was a lot more, although it was technical, it was using more people skills as well. So again, probably tying in more with kind of later down the line. So it was a good combination of technical skills and kind of people skills as well.
Yeah, thank you. Because I guess that's a misconception around technology, isn't it? The umbrella of information technology has so many different roles, but I think we tend to grow up thinking, oh, it's only for introverts, or it's only for people who can code, or it's only for very techie people. And, with that example there, you've just shown us that actually there's many different options and skills that, one can apply to those roles.
Definitely. And sort of just maybe going back to your question a moment ago, Joe, as well, I think it was only then as well, when I was actually employed in an IT role, that then the other roles became more clear as well. Because obviously then you work for an organization, see what other, especially when it was a big company as well, what other roles were there. But again, that was something that wasn't clear to me until I was already working, in the company. So it's kind of a bit late in a way, but useful as well. But as a starting point, just interesting, I think. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So what happened after you finished the training program with this company?
Yeah, so so as part of the contract with them, they, like I said, I worked effectively with one of the banks, and it was the 2-year contract. So at that point, I was paid. But then for the 3rd year, I was then effectively hired directly through the bank that I worked at. So I moved over after 2 years from the agency to being a full-time employee of the bank. And to be fair, that was when obviously then I earned a bit more money as well, rather than being employed via an agency. So that was for the 3rd year. And it was after the 3rd year that I moved to another company that I kind of went actually back to a few different times, which was a kind of payments company, an online kind of payments company, which was great as well. And again, I kind of did a few different roles there as well, but kind of linked to that support side of things. That's kind of how it went after the agency.
Okay, great. So you're now doing application support or similar in the bank, and then in this new payments company as well. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then what happens after that?
Yeah, so it was about 5 or 6 years ago. So this was, at that time, I think I'd been working in IT roles for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And although I enjoyed the roles, I didn't feel fulfilled, I guess. And then, so I was probably about 30. It was around that time, maybe just a bit before, when I kind of just thought to myself, okay, what do I really want to do? Like, what am I really passionate about and could imagine doing longer term? And then I thought back to my psychology A-level and the fact that actually a lot of, sort of research, if you like, or reading, and even like the shows or films and stuff that I watched, a lot of it is really like psychology related. Yeah. And then it was again looking at what roles were available in that remit. And when I saw kind of like counsellor psychotherapist, it just kind of seemed like a good option. Yeah. So I then, while I was working full time, I then effectively was doing effectively evening courses to become a qualified therapist. But what was great about the route that I chose is rather than it being like, because effectively it was 4 years for my initial training, but rather than it being you go into it and it's a 4-year commitment, it was almost like it was like a one level at a time. So it was kind of like doing the kind of foundation skills course, which was 1 year. Then when I passed that, I then went on to the next level, which was 1 year as well. And beyond that, the fourth level was kind of like the qualifying 2 years. So it was nice because it was like you could progress, but you didn't necessarily have to take the next step straight away. Yeah. But I kind of felt ready to at each point, and it just felt right. I think one of the challenges though was when it came to the final 2 qualifying years, rather than being an evening class, it was a whole day on a Monday. So at that point, I had to take the decision to reduce the hours that I worked. So the company that I worked for were great. They offered me kind of like a Tuesday to Friday role, effectively, in IT still. So I was doing my training on a Monday and then my work Tuesday to Friday. And that was for 2 years. And then after qualifying, I pretty much set up in private practice straight away. Yeah. So it kind of, looking back at it, it feels like ages ago when I first started, but it just happened quite naturally and it flowed really nicely.
Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about there, this sort of building block approach to the qualification stages, I think is really, in some ways, it feels more manageable, doesn't it? Because if you're signing up to a 4-year course while you're working, that can almost seem overwhelming. But if you're taking it step by step, not only can you kind of suss out whether you're enjoying it, and whether you can handle working as well as studying. You can also take it at your own pace. And if you've got time or financial pressures, you could have maybe paused one of those years if you've needed to. So I think that is a really nice way to do it.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that was the approach. I mean, when I first looked into it, I didn't know that there were so many different routes. And this was in a way kind of, I guess, would be more of a vocational route, because it's like I said, the first level was actually level 2. But then it was kind of going from level 2 to level 3 to level 4 and then qualifying. But like you said, I like the step-by-step approach. And, interestingly enough as well, like when I qualified, I studied at an independent counselling training organisation, and they actually offered me sort of some training to become one of their tutors. So I'm actually part of my work at the moment as well as a freelance tutor in their organisation. So I'm helping with the level 2 course. So that kind of foundation counselling skills course is kind of what I'm teaching on as well. So it's just all these opportunities that have kind of come from changing career that I just wouldn't have necessarily thought would have happened or would have been, even an option. So it's been great so far.
That's brilliant. And just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is level 2 diploma, level 3 degree, level 4 masters?
No, so it's a level 4 is the diploma. So the level 2 and level 3, they're kind of like certificates effectively. Right. So I have a level 2 certificate in counselling skills, level 3 certificate in counselling studies, and then a level 4 diploma in therapeutic counselling. And because I obviously had a degree, even though it was in a different subject, that's when afterwards I decided to further study, and I did a master's. So effectively, I'm trained at level 7, which is the master's now. But there's other levels in between. So again, loads of different routes available to get where you need to be.
Thank you. And just while we're on the topic of routes, if you were to, I don't know, talk to us about the traditional route in, what might that look for those that are interested?
In my mind, at least, or from my experience, I think it is the option that I took, which is a bit more kind of the vocational route. There certainly are degrees and masters that are available. But in my mind, I kind of feel like maybe it's more of the I don't know, one of the more common approaches is to kind of go down the route that I took. Because I think even to get onto a degree, I think they need you to have done either at least the level 2 or maybe even the level 3 beforehand anyway. So it's at least starting at that step and then potentially going on a different route from there. But I think that even things like, because when I was training to be a therapist, I was a volunteer therapist for a couple of organisations. Obviously wasn't being paid, obviously reduced working hours as well, so less money at the time. So obviously it's got to work out financially too. And I think one of the benefits of the vocational route is that in comparison to a degree or master's, it's a lot more cost efficient to do it that way. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that people tend to maybe go down that route as well. Yeah. And that seems like one of the more common routes in my mind.
Yeah. And certainly amongst my friends and peers, I've noticed that, people have, it does seem to be a second career for people. And I don't know whether that's because, of their own life experiences, or they just feel that they have more to offer clients as part of that second career. But I'm not so familiar with, people who've done it, studied that journey from 18, but that might just be a gap in my awareness.
I mean, to be honest, Jo, I think you're right. It does seem to be something that maybe is a bit more of a, generally speaking, maybe a second career for people. But having said that, I mean, I'm thinking back to some of the students that I either trained with or knew and met kind of networking and through those other organisations that were in their late teens, early 20s. Yeah. So it was effectively their first career. And I mean, life experience, sure, that comes into it. But, to help a client through something doesn't mean that I have to experience exactly that. So I think it's just being able to, if that's something that somebody wants to do to become a therapist, to not let it put you off, what age people tend to be. If anything, I found it a benefit being a younger, if you like, therapist, because a lot of my clients come to me actually in part because of that. So, where we all have maybe a bit of a stereotypical image of what a therapist might look like, which typically speaking is, it's usually kind of like middle-aged woman, typically straight as well, or older. So the fact that I'm male and younger has actually been really beneficial, I found as well. So I think if somebody wants to do it regardless of age, I would definitely just say to check kind of that out and potentially go for it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. And one thing that I just wanted to circle back to that I'm curious about, Mike, I think many of us go through our careers, as we get into our 30s and 40s, and we're not fulfilled, and we know we're not fulfilled, but we're often trapped by, financial situation or family circumstances or just not knowing what to do instead. So I'm just curious about what was that moment where you thought, I've got to do something here. This really just isn't working for me.
Yeah, I think it was that kind of, I guess what I refer to as that passion in a way. Like I said, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my IT roles and I got things from them, but I would say that I wasn't fulfilled by them. So like you say, and I think it was when it came to even on the training, it's like, whereas in my other job, I didn't really like going on a computer that much when I wasn't working, let alone further studying. So when I was training, I was like, what was happening for me was like, I didn't want to put a counselling related book down in my spare time and those kind of things. I was like, it was just it was something I was completely motivated and passionate about, and I just didn't want to stop learning. So it was like I was really becoming fulfilled through that process. And for me, that was something that I realized that I didn't have before in my other career. So looking back now, I would say that was a sign, shall we say, early on. That probably, even though I think I wouldn't change things, I wasn't initially doing something that I was passionate or fulfilled in.
Yeah. I think that's a good clue, isn't it? So if you can't put the book down or you can't stop thinking about it or doing the thing, it's a clue that there's a passion there.
A good sign, isn't it? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Brilliant. Thank you. So that takes you to, you qualify, and then you decide to set up your own private practice. So talk to us about that transition. Yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking, actually, but there was something, I don't know, like actually a supervisor that I worked with up until recently, she kind of always had this saying about having to take a leap of faith. And that was true, like even as a client going into the therapy process, there's an element of that is taking a leap of faith. And certainly with becoming a self-employed therapist, there definitely is that leap of faith. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, I think some therapists, don't take that because of maybe, I don't know if it's like linked to imposter syndrome or being scared of like it not working. But I just thought to myself that I had to try it. You know, if it didn't work, then I could always potentially just do something else as well. Like as in along with it, it didn't have to be a full-time thing. Yeah. And that's the beauty of therapy, I think, is like, you can do other things alongside it, like now with the teaching, for instance, as well. Yeah. But so for me, it was, I think that's it. Yeah. Really. Yeah. I think sometimes when we're at a decision point or at a crossroads, you can almost feel as though, okay, if I take this leap, that's it. But of course it isn't. If you take the leap and it doesn't quite work out, then you can pivot and perhaps go back to what you were doing before or do something else. It's not, if this doesn't work out, my life is over. You know, there are other paths forward. Totally. And I think that's the thing. It's not letting that fear, because I get it, you know, I had that too, but it's not letting that fear stop you from doing it. Yeah. And it's interesting as well that you say that, Joe, because I remember ever since I was young, you know, I said to you earlier about kind of, especially from when I was young, from my dad, really having that kind of thing about having to find stability, like whether that's financial or just like security from the role. I would never, ever in a million years would have considered going self-employed, because to me that wasn't secure, that wasn't stable. But actually, I found the opposite to be true to an extent. I mean, as I said before, I don't get paid when I'm on holiday if I'm sick, you know, those kind of things. But then, you know, that's when I've had to have put a little bit of money aside for those kind of eventualities. But just not letting that stop me from what I really want to do. And like you and I have both just said that, you know, if it weren't to work out at some point, then I can do other things as well. There's always options. It's just not letting that fear stop you. Yeah. I think our brains go to, you know, what the worst could happen. That's what the brain goes to, doesn't it? Whereas it's just trying to help your brain be aware of that and know that if that happens, you could do A, B, and C, but actually what's the best that could happen? And the best that could happen could be amazing. Exactly. And it could be, and that's the thing as well. Like I said, in a way, I mean, I know it's still relatively early days, but like even options that I didn't consider, which were really good, have come out of that decision to you know, set up in private practice. And it's, even things that I didn't consider as being part of that were there as well. So I'm really, really, really fortunate, but I think it's obviously for a lot of hard work and like dedication, you know? Yeah. But it's kind of like that, the nerves, not letting it kind of beat you and actually just going for it, I think. Yeah. Thank you. So that brings us to today. Yes. So looking back on your career journey, what would you call out as the high? Really good question. I think it must be really realizing that the first career that I was in IT wasn't
really for me, and actually taking that decision to do something about it. So it was really, and especially, like I said, it was dipping my toe into the world of like counselling to see if that was something that I liked. And not letting, I guess, kind of like traditional outlooks on things kind of put me off. Actually, it was fine to retrain, not thinking of myself as a failure for doing something that, that wasn't really working for me initially. So again, I think it is a lot about that kind of just going for what I wanted to do and or what I thought that I wanted to do. So for me, I think that's the high, just recognizing that and actually doing something about it. So yeah, that's definitely the high, I think.
Brilliant.
So far.
And what so far, yes. And what about the biggest challenge, perhaps a failure or something you had to overcome or a limiting belief? What would you speak to there of the career journey?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think probably going back to, like I said, I mean, I think we could label it different things, but I think either like imposter syndrome or something that can kind of like hold you back. I kind of feel like, as I said, there would definitely been a point until not that long ago where being self-employed, I didn't think that was something that I could do or should do, if you like. But it turned out to be really beneficial for me. And so, I think it was changing my mindset about that as well. And like, again, just like we've just touched on, knowing that, it might not necessarily work out, but you don't know until you try. So that barrier potentially would have been kind of like fear of failure or kind of like imposter syndrome, those kind of things. But just kind of just going for it anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Imposter syndrome comes up a lot, doesn't it? And I guess I think it can mean many different things, but one of the things it means for me is not feeling good enough in the environment you're in, or that you want to be in, or once you're there, feeling like somehow you don't deserve it. So perhaps you could share with the audience, I don't know, a top tip for managing imposter syndrome. Really good question. I think sometimes it's probably about equipping yourself with kind of like information and knowledge, like we talked about earlier, the fact that, for a long time, I didn't know what roles were available to me, what I could be doing. But obviously in hindsight now, had that information been available to me somehow, then I think that would have been really helpful. And I think it would have meant that I probably knew, or it would have helped me potentially to know what I was doing. Like maybe that was either kind of like with my training, with my studies, being a bit more focused in one area, knowing what I would be doing afterwards. So I think it all comes back to kind of just having that knowledge as to, what it is you kind of is available to you, and and being able to kind of work towards something less vague, like I said, my initial goal was working in IT, which, as you said, massive, whereas if it would have been something that I knew was like web design or specific roles, then I could have definitely tailored things a little bit more to working in that particular field. So I hope that helps to answer that question. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Mike, talk to us about the role of role models and mentors on your career journey.
Yeah. Looking back, I think, and actually throughout my kind of career in IT, there was a couple of like managers in particular that were really, really supportive. And, especially when it came to like knowing that I was retraining to eventually do something else. Some at that point less supportive, because it was almost kind of like they knew that I would be leaving one day, whereas others still really supported me anyway. And it was about that, actually, like that's when I knew that it wasn't just for like the company that we worked for, they were just actually really supportive. So there's a couple of managers in my mind that stand out as just that acceptance and support. And so definitely career-wise there, but actually as well, like there's a couple of, all of the tutors really that I had on my counselling training in the initial 4 years. I mean, it was a great course, and I think they did a really good job of training us up and getting us to be at the point where we were qualified therapists. And even now, like they're kind of my role models when it comes to what I'm doing now, the therapy. So a mixture of across the IT side of things and the retraining. But it is all about that real supportiveness. And like I said, just that real, kind of acceptance, if you like, as well.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So for somebody thinking about, let's say somebody is a young person, say 18 to 24, and they're thinking about this might be a career for them. What educations or trainings would you recommend that would be helpful to explore right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, definitely going onto a website like the BACP, for instance, like knowing what courses are available, or even just do like a local search as well, because a lot of times with counselling and psychotherapy training, it starts at maybe like local colleges. So I think it's about maybe just getting a bit more information as what courses are available. Like, is it online? Because some of the earlier ones can be online. The later qualifications need to be majoritively in person, is my understanding. But some of the earlier levels can be online. So it might be just worth looking at what's available to you, whether that's a local college, whether that's somewhere that offers online, but not that might not necessarily be in the locality. But just kind of figuring out like what courses are available, and there is actually I mentioned earlier kind of like the level 2 course that I did, which was 1 year, but actually before that there is an introduction to counselling, which I believe is like maybe 6 weeks even.
Okay.
So and that can be a really great way of knowing, even not having to commit for a whole year, it being kind of several weeks, just to dip your toe in and seeing if that could potentially be something good for you. And the good thing about that is obviously a lot lower cost as well. So it could be a really good way of seeing whether that's something that you would like to go into. So that introduction to kind of counselling kind of course, I think could be really, really important.
That could be great. Yeah, thank you. And to be able to call yourself a psychotherapist and a counsellor and be registered with the body that you mentioned, I think you said BCP. What's almost the minimum threshold? BACP, yeah. What's the minimum threshold there?
So, I think it's probably as similar with the other professional membership bodies as well.
Yeah.
But so with mine, with the BACP, I had to have effectively, I think it was at least 100 client hours before I was qualified. So that when I was working as effectively a placement therapist or volunteer therapist in an organisation, having to have clocked up at least 100 hours. Other courses, I think that you have to have more. You have to, a lot of the time, have your own personal therapy as well. So having the experience of being a client. So I think throughout my courses, I think it was over the 4 years, I think it was probably about at least 50 hours of personal therapy that I had to have as well. And being on a course that offers, I think it was in total, it was X number of hours. So it was 450 teaching hours or something along those lines. But actually a certain number of teaching hours that you had to have, client hours, and sometimes personal therapy as well. And it's only at that point when you're qualified that you can become a member of them. And also to advertise on the places I mentioned earlier, like I can't advertise on their platforms unless I have proof that I'm qualified as well. So even though technically anybody could become a therapist without necessarily having the qualifications, it will probably be difficult for them to actually advertise for clients anyway. So it's really, even though it's not a regulated industry, it's a way to kind of help to kind of regulate in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And you mentioned that a great deal of your clients come through those websites. So it's really important to be qualified and have your profile there. Thank you.
Yeah, and absolutely. Yeah.
And if somebody wants to find out a little bit more about the different educational routes in BACP, I'm guessing would be a good place to find out more.
Yeah, definitely. The other ones, like with the vocational route that I mentioned earlier, there's an examining body called the CPCAB, And so I'm one of the tutors for the CPCAB, and their website is great. It gives you a real rundown of all of the different levels that they offer and the different stages as well.
Yeah.
And I think because it goes beyond just their examining body as well, I think to kind of like degree level, for example, as well. But it is mainly focused on the courses that they offer. But that was a starting point for me, which was really useful. But the BACP is great as well. And as I said, just even just general sort of search for local like colleges who might be offering, evening courses, for instance, as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would be my go-to websites.
Okay, thank you. So, Mike, if we think about the soft skills that make somebody a great psychotherapist or counsellor, what soft skills would you call out there?
It's interesting because, and I know we kind of use like counsellor, psychotherapist, and in a way, sometimes the terms are used interchangeably, and I think they can be. But in a way, the way that I think of when I offer counselling services and psychotherapy services, there is a bit of difference, really. Well, some key differences, I think. And so within counselling, typically it's a lot more kind of warm, if you like, the feeling. So it's kind of somebody who's kind of obviously very professional, but it's got that kind of like friendly, if you like, kind of approach as well. Because I think, a part of it to be able to open up to somebody about something that you're struggling with is difficult anyway. So it's kind of, I think that real kind of warm relationship that you're kind of building is really important. So I think to be able to, just to be able to talk to people and to be able to kind of put your judgments to one side, which is a lot of what the training is about as well. So it's really helpful in being able to do that. So we're not kind of like expecting people to never make a judgment again. It's just being able to be aware of when it is that judgments are creeping in, and to be able to kind of put them to one side so you can really focus on the client, the person that you're working with. So I think it really is about the empathy and that real warmth, I think. So that's when I think of like the qualities of the relationship, if you like, with a counsellor. I mean, and it's similar in psychotherapy as well, but I think just traditionally, there's a little bit more distance might not be the right word as such, but I mean, for various reasons, like that part of the work, in psychotherapy, the therapist might be a little bit more a little bit more distant. They'll be really helping you to work through your problems, but it might not feel kind of like as warm an environment, if that makes sense. But like I said, there's very good reasons why they use that approach, is to kind of actually potentially get a lot of unconscious stuff from the client as well, and work through like relational issues, especially kind of like perhaps with parents. So they're doing it for very good reasons. They wouldn't necessarily tell you much about themselves or like sort of self-disclose. Some counsellors, like myself, disclose a little bit more when it's appropriate. But some psychotherapists traditionally would say that they avoid kind of telling clients anything about themselves. So there are some key differences. But I think, empathy, warmth, those kind of things, just really wanting to help people. That's a great start.
It's a great start.
To become a therapist.
That's a great start, And I might be oversimplifying this, so please correct me if I've gone down the wrong path here. But sometimes I think of psychotherapy as looking back and trying to figure out what was going on there to help someone move forward, whereas I think about counselling as focusing on the future and moving forward. But again, please, I may have got that completely wrong, so please tell me.
No, I mean, I think in a nutshell, that is it, Joe. I mean, and that's, but where it kind of becomes a little bit more complicated as well is the fact that, so for instance, I was trained to become what's called an integrative therapist. So I use both in my work. So and it's about, it's using certain techniques or certain approaches as well. But effectively, I think when I use kind of more of my psychodynamic, if you like, or the psychotherapeutic techniques and concepts, I'm working specifically with, it might be either past stuff, so whether that's childhood, teenage years, or sometimes more recent past as well. But also, as I said earlier, about that kind of like maybe a lot of the unconscious processes as well. So it might be that we're kind of, it's really common that we go around sort of like projecting things onto other people when it's our stuff. And so in psychotherapy, it's about actually realizing what you're projecting and sort of working through that as well. So yeah, traditionally psychodynamic is more the past and unconscious processes, whereas traditional sort of counselling, you will be talking about the past as well often, but it might not necessarily about getting to the roots of things. But it's definitely, I think, maybe a bit more of a focus on the presenting issue and how that's impacting the client in the here and now, and the changes, like you said, that they want to make going forward. Whereas sometimes within psychotherapy, it can be a lot about kind of early relationships, traditionally with parents and caregivers, unconscious processes, and where that might have stemmed from, so that somebody can maybe understand a lot of that stuff a lot more as well. And like I said, certain like theoretical concepts that we'll be bringing in to do that.
Yeah,
so I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think that, I guess the reason why that's important is because awareness is important for action.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. But like I said earlier, I mean, and especially I guess in the UK, because they're not protected titles, and as I say, it's common for people to use these interchangeably. And what I sort of say is counselling and psychotherapy might differ with other therapists. They're taking it might be slightly different, but I think effectively, we've gotten to kind of like the core of what the sort of some of the key differences are.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Mike, what do you think the future holds for this profession?
Really interesting question, because I think, before COVID, not many therapists were working online. It wasn't the norm back then. Some therapists were, don't get me wrong. I think it was like Skype back then before Zoom became popular. But not many people working online. So it's interesting. I think there's definitely a lot more. There's a lot more kind of that stuff that can be done online. So actually working in either one-on-one or group therapy. But also I think it's that this is where technology comes in. It's, a lot of things like even like workshops and training that is in for the client as well. So I think it can be really helpful for them to get a lot more, again, like knowledge and understanding of some of the issues that they're facing. So I kind of feel like that's definitely, or it seems to me that that's more at the fore as well now. And I can imagine that going forward where people are a lot more aware of a lot of the sort of theories, concepts, and the things that we're impacted by on a daily basis. So I think technology is key to that.
Yeah. And I think that, I guess there's two things I'm thinking of. The pandemic, I think everybody is talking about how the need for, a mental health crisis. And so the need for therapy may increase. And I also just wanted to kind of link that in with, I guess, the differences between the US and the UK, where in the US, the therapy is very common, whereas in the UK, we only just seem to be starting to catch up on that journey.
Yeah, it is interesting because, in the US, maybe this is where it's different as well. It is regulated and sort of protected titles. You have to have a license to practice in the States. But as you said, it's just even from, I think even like what sort of TV films, that kind of thing, we can see that it's just a lot more common for people to be in long-term therapy, as in, almost indefinitely. Whereas I think the way we see it in the UK, it's definitely about kind of helping the client to get to an ending point. But so, I think that's a big difference. And I think it's interesting as well, Joe, because even though I think there's less stigma these days when it comes to seeking therapy, what's fascinating is so for instance, when I was working in IT and training to become a therapist, I would be speaking to some colleagues in the office, obviously before COVID, and sometimes just by sharing what I was kind of wanting to retrain to become a therapist, sometimes I'd have either like friends of friends or colleagues at work, whatever, they'd share with me that they had therapy before, that they were currently in therapy. And I think even then, for me, just having those conversations made me realize that it's actually a lot more common even than I thought. It's just, I think that sometimes people may think that there is still a bit of a stigma attached to being in therapy, which, it's such a common experience for us to go to therapy as when we need it. But I think, I think a lot more people go to therapy than maybe we would think. And I think because it is, you know, it might be quite something that's quite short term and very focused. And it's something that they can go back to again in the future if that could be useful to them, rather than it being this kind of just seeing your therapist once a week indefinitely. You know, that's where I think it differs in the US maybe.
Yeah. If we wouldn't not go to the doctor if we had a broken leg, would we?
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. I think it is about seeing therapy as kind of what the goals are. Like I said earlier, sometimes I work with clients who have got very specific goals. So, you know, throughout the therapy, I kind of check in with them regularly to see, you know, have their goals changed? Have they kind of got what they wanted from therapy? Are they close to ending? You know, these kind of things. And I think like it might be when I do those kind of check-ins or reviews, if you like, that the clients actually say, oh, like things have changed. Like I've kind of got what I initially came for, but there's other things that have come up for me that I would like to work through. Other times it's kind of like, no, for now that's enough. And then knowing that they could come back either, you know, working with myself or could another therapist in the future. But I mean, obviously I'm realizing as well that, I mean, I know today a lot of it is about my experience, but you raised a really good point, Joe, about like the pandemic and the impact on mental health generally. And I think what's challenging at the minute, I think, is that, you know, I work in private practice with clients who can effectively afford to pay for therapy. Whereas people who can't, and especially with cost of living now, you know, sometimes like it's great that therapy is available on the NHS, but it's usually quite short term. So it's usually sort of 6, 12, maybe a bit more sessions, and very much focused on one particular issue, if you like. So, and there is a big waiting list as well, which is why some people end up coming to private therapy, because it's obviously there's more of a need for it, and they can't wait you know, for to be called up at some point in the future to start therapy. So it's I think it's a real challenge with that. These days.
I think that's a really great point, isn't it? I think I was listening to a podcast the other day, and you know, it can be years before somebody can get therapy on the NHS at the moment. So, Mike, I'm curious about these apps I keep hearing about, like BetterHelp. If you know anything about those, how do they fit into this picture?
Yeah, so I don't know through my own personal experience, but certainly, so I'm on a lot of kind of like social media groups. So for instance, on Facebook, there's a lot of like therapist groups. Some of those are UK, some of them are more kind of global, but there are therapists on there that sometimes ask, you know, is it worth kind of going through BetterHelp to get some more clients? And I think, you know, like with anything, there's going to be mixture of people's experiences. But I mean, there's a friend of mine who I initially trained with as well, who's a qualified therapist who does some work through BetterHelp. And so, my understanding it's like it's a way that the client can obviously find BetterHelp and a therapist through them, and then BetterHelp almost acts as kind of the platform. So they can then get the client to work with an appropriate therapist. I'm not sure with regards to things like how fees or anything like that work. I presume that what the therapist would get is less than what the client pays. With kind of BetterHelp taking a cut. But I think they've got a lot of social media, and I think what the videos that I've seen on across like Facebook, for example, and Instagram for BetterHelp is I think that they're trying to help to lower the stigma that is attached to therapy by really normalizing, you know, seeking out a therapist, whether it's through them or anywhere else. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. So, Mike, for anybody thinking they want to find out a bit more, in addition to the BACP website you mentioned, where else would you point people?
As I said, I mean, so as in to be training to become a therapist.
Or if they just want to explore if this might be a career that they might like to find out more about, or they really want to find out how to pursue it.
Yeah, I think. To be honest, I'm struggling to think of other like specific sites, but I know I can't. The name of it doesn't come to mind at the moment. But I don't. It's not NUS, but it's something related to you know, when you like applying for university. programs.
Yeah.
There's a website where I think it literally has, like you can type in like a role or like an industry, and it will tell you kind of like what the requirements are to kind of get into that, and give you a bit of information about, you know, how much, like what work opportunities might be available for you after you're qualified. Those kind of things, which can be quite helpful, because I think some therapists who are training, they get to the point where it comes to the end of the course and then it's like, oh, well, I'm kind of, whether it's something like I'm not making as much money as I would have hoped to. So I think it can be good to get that information earlier on, so that it can obviously help to set your expectations as to kind of what will my salary potentially look like, what work opportunities are available, either private practice or otherwise. So just really about getting that information as soon as possible. And as I said, I really would say with the CPCAB, the awarding body, who offer like an introduction to counselling course, is again another great starting point. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Mike, as we move towards wrapping up, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, definitely that there's so many different routes to becoming a qualified therapist. Having said that, I wouldn't change a thing about the route that I took. I mean, for instance, you know, I mean, it was 4 years until I was qualified, and then an additional year at the masters. So technically, up to 5 years. You can do it, and I believe maybe three years potentially is like the minimum amount of time. But I actually think it was really useful to kind of almost take that kind of slower approach as well, because training to become a therapist, it isn't just about this is how to be a therapist. It's about working through your own stuff. And I'd say it's a lot of that. It's a lot of self-reflection, developing self-awareness, working through your own issues so you can really help other people with theirs. And I think, to be honest, that's something that, and it sounds strange to say now, but in hindsight, I didn't know that was going to be the case. I thought I was signing up to a counselling course where I was just going to be taught this is what a therapist is, this is what you do. But it wasn't. It was so much more than that. It was like working through it was basically like having 4 years of therapy in a great way, as in, like just what I learned about myself throughout that process was not only helpful for me and like my relationships with like friends, family, partners, etc., but also, you know, for my clients who I'm working with now. So yeah, it's kind of knowing what to expect from the course. And a lot of people that I see, whether it's on these social media groups like the therapist groups I mentioned, whether it's people that I trained with, other students who are training or have trained to become therapists, it's like, I think that's the one thing that they really love about these courses, is just how much it's helped them as well with their own stuff, you know, which totally makes sense. You know, as I'm saying this, it totally makes sense, but it was just something that I didn't know before I started.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. 2 for the price of 1.
Yeah.
All right. So if you could go back and speak to 10-year-old Mike, who wanted to be an actor and then decided computers were the way forward, what would you tell young Mike?
You know, like I just mentioned, Joe, I wouldn't change anything. I genuinely wouldn't change anything with regards to my career like path. But I think probably the advice I would say is to kind of not to worry too much about the future. Because I kind of feel like, in a way, it stops you from really enjoying like what you're doing in the moment. So I think, you know, it's easy, I think, to be anxious about what might happen, as we said earlier, about like what the worst case scenarios might be. But I think sometimes it is just doing about what feels right. So it's kind of just like recognizing that and just kind of being a bit more present, I guess, rather than worrying about what could or might happen in the future. So I would just say, to kind of not worry about so much about what the future might look like. That's probably the key bit of advice I wish I could give my younger self. For sure.
Yeah. And I think, as your journey has showed, not only does it all work out in the end, if you take one path and realize that's not the perfect path for you, you can take a different path.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things maybe that I'm really grateful for as well. And it's a bit more of a generational thing too, and which is great for obviously younger people now, because thinking back to, especially, I don't know, say my grandparents' generation, for example, that seemed to be, it was like, you know, you started a job and that's what you would do until you retired, as in like either working for that same company even as well. Whereas now it's totally different. I think you mentioned some research that you did earlier, and I think similar research I did at some point recently was saying, I think on average we have 3 careers in our lifetime, you know, maybe kind of like our generations.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like that seems like it again makes sense as well to me maybe. And I think it just shows, like you said, that, you know, you can do one thing and there's no, and I guess that ties into kind of the advice I'll give myself. There's no end point as such, because the goalposts are always changing. So and I think that's the thing. That can maybe be a bit nerve-wracking or anxiety provoking, but actually for me, that's really exciting knowing that there's not a defined period of like a defined goal that I'm getting to, because that's always changing and shifting. Yeah. And I think that makes sure that we kind of keeps us on our toes and hopefully, you know, kind of being a bit more passionate about, you know, what it is we're doing and making sure we're doing something that we really, really gives us purpose and that we really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to this podcast the other day. I definitely can't remember the guest and I don't even remember the podcast, but it was about entrepreneurship. But it was really just saying where you think you're going to be this time next year, you're going to be somewhere completely different, and that's going to be okay. Right. But just don't almost get too attached to the outcome, because it probably will look very different, but it'll be okay. So
I like that. Yeah, because that's the thing, we never know. Yeah, definitely.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what the future. Yeah.
We
really
spend we spend a lot of time trying to predict the future, don't we? But we really have zero control of it. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's accepting that, isn't it? And then being like, actually, let's just do what we can now. Yeah. I think it's a good approach.
Yeah. All I can control is the here and now. So let's figure that out.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mike, I love a quote or an inspirational expression or a motto. Do you have any that you love that you could share with us?
Right, let me think. Well, the person who springs to mind, so let's see if I can remember the quote. So a very counselling related, Carl Jung. And he said, I don't know if I'm getting this quote exactly right, but who lives outside dreams, who lives inside awakes. I think that's pretty much the quote. And I think to me, that really does mean, you know, what we've been talking about today, like the power of like self-reflecting and developing self-awareness, and actually just how amazing that can be for our own learning. You know, we can understand ourselves better, sort of maybe have healthy relationships and actually help us to where we want to get to in the future as well. So I kind of feel like that's a really appropriate quote, actually. You know, it sums up a lot of what we've spoken about today.
Yeah. And I really like that too. And I don't know the quote, but I really like that concept. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me as though it also relates to external factors rather than within us. And I think that, you know, I think that many of us grow up thinking we've got to have this and we've got to have the other, and, you know, we've got to have the house, we've got to have the job, we've got to have the car, all of that kind of stuff. But actually, I think what you realise is it is what's inside that counts, and that's the bit you have to get right. The external stuff just doesn't really matter.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, I like that that kind of thought about that quote, because I'm sure that 100% comes into it as well. Yeah, the external, it not all being about that, and just how important, the internal stuff is as well. Yeah. Definitely, I'd agree.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. Yeah, I really enjoyed the session. I just said session. I shouldn't say that. I really enjoyed the episode. See, I'm thinking I've had a therapy session.
Not quite. But I've really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go? I think, as we've said before, Joe, I think it is all about just finding, you know, what it is that you're really passionate about. And I kind of feel like genuinely, I think where there's a will, there's a way, you know, to an extent, I genuinely believe that to be true. And I think it is about, you know, like I said, getting that information, that knowledge of what might be available to us and what we might want to do, because then I think it's going to give us much more of an indication as like, of what is available to us in the future. So I think it is about kind of, doing something that you're kind of really passionate about and hopefully feel fulfilled in. Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you so much for joining Mike and I today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you found any value in today's episode, please help us spread the word by following or subscribing to the show. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.
I know I'll be okay, 'cause I found my way.